This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, welcome to QA class. This is the first week. That is, today is the third day of QA. Let's do a recap of what we studied yesterday. Yesterday's class, we studied some basic things in testing, right? So we studied what is testing. Testing is comparison of expected result and actual result. So when you compare actual and expected result, it is nothing but testing. That we also um, studied why testing is important, why there is a separate testing team in the project who's going to perform the test. We Other than that, we also learned some terms like what is functional testing, what is non-functional testing. We also studied about black box testing, white box testing, gray box testing, and mutation testing. Black box testing is what we do. Um, so we don't get inside the coding details, we don't touch the code. So code is inside a black box. You just give the input and check if the output is correct. So that is nothing but black box testing. And then other than that, we also um studied about non-functional test, which is example for non-functional test is performance testing, where you check the performance of the application. You check how quick is the application. We studied what are requirements, right? Requirements are something that you get from the client. So client will give you the requirements. We also studied role of the business analyst. So what a business analyst is expected to do. So he will collect the business ideas, or he will collect the high level requirements from the client, and he will write a detailed requirement document. So that detailed requirement document, we call it as FRS document. So business analyst is responsible for preparing the functional requirement specification or FRS document. So these are the things that we studied in the last class. Any questions, anyone, before we get started with today's session? Anyone has any questions from previous class? Okay. All right, if there are no questions, let's get started with today's session. Now, let's take one more example. I also told you about mock-up screens yesterday, right? Mock-up screens is something which will be created by the business analyst. So mock-up screens are those dummy screens or sample screens which developers can develop to design their web pages. Now, if you take the example of an application, like let's call it as a marks calculator. Now you have a field called as marks, something like this. You have a field called marks. When you enter the marks, it should show the right grade. Now if we have to develop such application for university professors, now here university professors are called as the business team. University professors are the business team because for them we are building the application. They're also called as product owner. In Agile, we call them as product owner. What is Agile? I'll tell you later. But in Agile methodology, they're also called as product owner or clients. They all mean the same. Now, university professors will give requirements like this. If the marks is less than 35, it should show the grade as fail. If the marks is between 35 and 49, it should show the grade as C. If the marks is between 50 and 59, it should show the grade as B. And if the marks is greater than 60, it should show the grade as A. So these are the requirements. And then he'll also add assumptions saying that only 0 to 100 is allowed. It should not allow anyone to enter negative marks. Only numbers are allowed in the marks field. Now, all these are called as requirements, and the detailed requirement will be written by the BA. And that document, like we know, is FRS. Now, when business analyst will prepare this document, chances are there that he might write something incorrect, right? Just like developer might write um, a wrong code. That is why we have testing in place. That is why we test the application to check if whatever coding developer has done, if it is correct, right? Same way, when BA is preparing this document, he might make mistakes when he is writing this document, right? It can happen because BA is also a human being, so he can make mistakes when he is preparing this document. So what will happen if there's something wrong or whatever BA has written in the document is incorrect? Now developers are going to refer this, and accordingly they will develop the application. So whatever is written in the requirement document, developers are going to refer the same thing, and accordingly they will develop. Testers are also going to refer the same document, and accordingly they will test the application, right? So whatever is written in this document, testers are going to refer that, and accordingly they will test the application. So when there is something incorrect written in this document, ultimately it will lead to defect in the application. Now let's say, for example, client had told that anything greater than 60, it should show the grade as A, but by mistake business analyst wrote anything greater than 65 should be grade A, anything between 50 and 64 should be grade B. So by mistake BA wrote like this. So anything between 50 and 64 should be grade B. But what professors wanted was anything greater than 60 should be grade A. But BA wrote anything greater than 65 should be grade A. Now this is actually wrong, right? Whatever is written or updated in the FRS is incorrect. So what developer will do? Developer is going to refer this document, and accordingly he will develop the application. So he will write the code in this way. Anything less than 35 fail, 35 49 grade C, 50 to 64 grade B, and anything greater than 65 grade A. Now tester is going to refer the same document, and accordingly he will test the application. Tester will check if marks is entered is less than 35, is it showing the grade as fail? If he enters any marks between 35 and 49, is it showing grade as C? And then he will enter, let's say, 62, check if the grade is B. Yes, it is showing the grade as B. And anything greater than 65, like 67 or 68, it should show the grade as A. Yes, so everything is working fine. So they will pass the test. And then it goes to production, as in it is given back to professors so they can start using it. Now, when they start using, that is when they observe that when they enter the marks as, let's say, 62, it is expected, according to them, it should show the grade as A, but it is showing grade as B. It's a defect, right? We call it as production defect. Production defect means the product has been released. Actual user, real user is using it. When they're using it, if they find any defect, such defects are called as production defects. It's a production defect. It is not calculating the grades properly. So what university professors will do, they'll go back, they'll ask the testers, there's a bug and the testing team has missed it. Now testing team will have to trace back and check what was tested, what was executed, was the testing done correctly. When they trace back, that is when they observe that in the requirement document it is mentioned anything greater than 65 should be grade A. When they test it, when they enter 62, it is showing grade B. When they enter 67 or 68, it is showing grade A. So it is matching with what is written in the requirement document. So that is when they will know that the actual bug is in the requirement document. Right? So where this defect or where this bug was present, it was there right from the beginning of software development. It was actually there in the document, which just migrated to the other stages of software development. Developer referred it, accordingly he developed the application. Testers also referred the same document, accordingly they tested, so it went unnoticed till it went to production. So if there is something wrong in the requirement document, ultimately it will lead to defect in the application. So not just the code, not just the application that should go through testing, the documents that are created should also be tested, right? Because same logic, same principle applies to this also. If there's something wrong, that needs to be corrected, and since it is created by a human being, he can make mistakes. So we need to find out those mistakes. So not just the code or the application that goes through testing process, any document that you create also goes through testing. And that kind of test, we call it as static testing. It's called as static testing. So what is static testing? Static testing is nothing but reviews. Static testing, nothing but reviews. Okay, so any document that is created, like the requirement document, so this is the main document, right? It is the main document. Requirement or the FRS document is the main document which should be reviewed before it is used, just to ensure that there are no mistakes in the document. The static testing are also called as reviews or documentation testing. So the purpose of review is to uncover any defects in the document. So you have two things, static testing and dynamic testing. What is static testing? Static testing is nothing but reviews which are done on the documents. Dynamic testing is the actual testing that we do on the application. Actual testing that we do on the application is called as dynamic testing, the actual testing that is done on the software. So that is static testing and dynamic testing. Now the next topic we are going to learn is different testing techniques. There are different black box testing techniques that can be applied. I'll tell you what exactly are testing techniques. There are different testing techniques which you can apply when you're testing the application. There are 5 different testing techniques. All these are black box testing techniques. A boundary value analysis, equivalence class partitioning, error guessing, positive testing, and negative testing. A boundary value analysis, equivalence class partitioning, positive testing, and negative testing. So these are 5 different testing techniques that are there. So let's go through these testing techniques one by one. Before that, let's understand what is a testing technique. What exactly is the meaning of technique and why we need it. So let me show you one example. I'll go to walmart.com. Let's click on sign in and I'll go to create account page. Okay, so I'll go to create account page. Here I have to enter these details to create an account on Walmart. I have first name, last name, email address, and password. I have these fields. So here if you see, I have a password field. Right, I have a password field. Here I need to enter a password. So when I click on it, it shows me the password rules. It says the password must include 8 to 100 characters. Password that you enter should include 8 to 100 characters. So it should be anywhere between 8 and 100. Now, if I have to test this password field, I will have to test if it is allowing me to enter password between 8 and 100. But some negative flows also needs to be tested. I'll have to check if it throws any error when I enter a password less than 8. It throws error when I enter password greater than 100. Now to test this field, should I be testing with all possible numbers? Like first I'll test with 1 to 7. 1 to 7 should not be accepted. And then I will test from 8 to 100. I'll test by entering password whose length is 8, and then 9, and then 10, 11, 12, so on. And then I will test it by entering password whose length is greater than 100, 101, 102, 103, 104. All these should not be accepted. So do you think it is feasible to do these many tests just for one field on the application? Should we be doing it that way, like from 1 to 7 and from 8 to 100 and then 100 plus? What do you think? Okay, screen is not showing. Uh, can you see the Walmart create account page?
Yeah, we can see the Walmart page, but what you are writing, you are writing anything over there or not?
No, 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 no.
Oh, okay then.
Only this. I was just reading this, the rules that is
Oh,
written here.
okay. Alright.
Uh, yeah. No, right? So doing those many tests is not feasible. Just to test one single field, this password field, we cannot do these many tests. Like it would be more than 100 and tests just for the password field. It is not feasible. This we call it as exhaustive testing. Exhaustive testing is practically not possible. You cannot just keep on testing the application. You cannot just keep on testing the application. Practically, it is not possible to do exhaustive testing. You have to limit the test. You have to minimize the number of tests, yet find maximum number of bugs. Testing an application with all possible combinations is not possible. Practically, it is not possible. That is where these testing techniques come into picture. By applying these testing techniques, now I have so many variety, range of values to that can be tested, right? 8 to 100, greater than 100, less than 100, 8. So how do I pick what should be the right testing that I should do on the password field? So these testing techniques will help you in writing less number of tests but yet find maximum number of bugs. Right? So let's go through these testing techniques one by one. In that, the first testing technique is called as boundary value analysis. So what is boundary value analysis? Boundary value analysis states that maximum bugs are found at the boundaries. What are the boundaries? So if you take example of this password field, 8 and 100, 8 and 100 are called as boundaries. This password field accepts password greater than 8, less than 100. So here 8 and 100 are called as boundaries. So when they did a research, they found that developer tends to make more mistakes when he's writing this range, right? So when he's writing the code, he's going to write it this way. Password length should be greater than 8. That is when he can miss greater than or equal to. He must just write greater than. In that case, it will not accept password whose length is 8 or less than 100. Instead of writing less than or equal to, by mistake, you'd have written less than, just less than 100. So in that case, again, it will not accept password whose length is 100. So at the boundaries, developer tends to make more mistakes. So boundary value analysis concentrates on the boundaries. You apply a formula and you derive less number of tests which can yield maximum number of defects. So the formula that we use for boundary value analysis is this: n, n plus 1 and n minus 1, where n is the boundary value. For example, for any field, let's say if the boundary is 60, let's say a field accepts number 60, so 60 would be the boundary. So for this, we'll apply the formula n. We'll apply n. N is 60 here. You have to apply n. N is 60. And then n plus 1. N plus 1. 60 plus 1. 60 plus 1 is 61. And then n minus 1. 60 minus 1. 60 minus 1 is what? 60 minus 1 is 59. So that field I will test with three values: n, 60, n plus 1, 61, and n minus 1, 59. I'll test with three different values. So this is the formula we use for boundary value analysis. Now let's apply the same thing for the Walmart password field, which has two boundaries. 8 is called as the lower boundary, 100 is called as the upper boundary. So for both boundaries, you have to apply the boundary value analysis formula. First, let's apply it for 8. For 8, can you tell me what will be the boundary values? Can you ping the answer in the chat box? What will be the boundary values? What will be the boundary values? Apply the formula n plus 1, n minus 1 and ping the answer in the chat box. Okay, n is 8, right? N is 8. So you'll test with 7, 8, 9, right? Test with 7, 8, 9. So boundary values are 7, 8, and 9. Because if you see here, n is equal to 8, right? N is 8. And then what is n plus 1? N plus 1, 8 plus 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. And then n minus 1. What is n minus 1? 8 minus 1. What is 8 minus 1? 7. So I will test with three values. I will test by entering password whose length is 8. When I enter a password whose length is 8, it should be accepted, right? So it should be accepted. So password whose length is 8 should be accepted. And then I will try with n plus 1. I'll enter password whose length is 9 characters. So when I enter a password whose length is 9 characters, this again should be accepted. 9 also should work. And then I'll test with n minus 1. I'll test with n minus 1, that is 8 minus 1. 8 minus 1 is 7. So when I enter a password whose length is 7 characters, it should throw error message. It should not be allowed. So we applied the formula n plus 1, n minus 1 only for one boundary, 8. Right? So when you apply it on 8, this is what you get. n plus 1, and n minus 1. Right, so it is 8, 9, 7, or 7, 8, 9. Now let's apply the formula for the upper boundary, which is 100. Can you tell me what will be the boundary values for 100? N is 100, yes. 99, 100, 101. Correct. So it will be 99, 100, and 101. 99, 100, 101 will be the boundary values. I will test by entering password whose length is 99. When I enter a password whose length is 99, it should be accepted. And then I'll test by entering password whose length is 100. When I enter a password whose length is 100, again should be accepted. And then I will test by entering password whose length is 101. When I enter a password whose length is 101, it should throw error message, right? It should not be accepted. It should throw error message. So like this, I will test with 3 different values for the upper boundary, n plus 1, n minus 1. That is 99, 100 and 101. When I test with 99, 100, 101, I will like in total we will get 6 different tests, right? We can do 6 different tests instead of doing 100 plus test. By applying boundary value analysis, we can only do 6 different tests. Test with n plus 1 and n minus 1. So that way you can limit your testing to few scenarios, yet you can find maximum number of bugs. So boundary value analysis technique is applied when you have a field wherein you can give range of values. If there is any field which accepts number, like we take the example of the marks calculator, right? So there you can enter marks between 0 and 100. For that also you can apply boundary value analysis, or password field which has a minimum and a maximum range, or any field which has range of value. Like let's say if you're testing a flight booking application, you have number of tickets field where you can book tickets from minimum 1 to maximum 10. So 1 and 10 will be the boundary values, so I can test with 1 and 10. So like this, when you have any field which accepts range of values, that is when you can go with boundary value analysis. That is boundary value analysis. So this is one technique we have. So this is the same example we took for there's some background noise. I'm going to mute your mics. Okay. This is the same example of the Walmart password field. Earlier they had 7 to 100. Earlier the password rule was 7 to 100, but now they've changed it to 8 to 100. So let's make the same changes. 8 to 100. For 8 to 100, boundary values are 7, 8, 9, 100, 101 and 99 are the boundary values. Now before we move on to the next testing technique, let's understand these terms which you will hear very frequently when you join a testing project. So you should be aware of these terms. You should know what these terms are, because you are going to hear these terms very frequently in real time. So what is KT? What is KT? KT stands for knowledge transfer. Before that, there's one question from Tanu. How to check uppercase, lowercase, and special character? That will be same. So you go and check what if if you don't, you need to do 2 tests. When you just type A B C D, let's say E F G H without any uppercase, when you try to create a password, it should throw error saying that at least one uppercase should be there because you've given everything as lowercase. Now you will try by entering everything in uppercase, something like this. Let me click on show. So when we give everything in uppercase, when I give everything in uppercase, again this shows upper and lowercase letter because this does not have any lowercase. And then you give a combination of uppercase and lowercase. Like here I have used a combination of upper and lowercase. When I give uppercase and lowercase both, then I see that this is accepted, but there's no number and special character. So when I don't enter any number or special character, it shows this cross mark. So let's add a number. or a special character. When I add a special character, again this is accepted. It says one number or special character, any of these. So I need to try with number also. Both should be accepted. So like this you do your test. Okay, so you check the password rules of the application and accordingly you derive your test. All right, so let's see what is KT. KT is also KT also stands for knowledge transfer. So what is knowledge transfer? When you join a new project, right? When you join a new testing project, no matter how many years of experience you have, you cannot start testing the application from day one, right? So no matter you have 5 years of experience or 10 years of experience, you cannot start testing the application from day one. It is not possible, because before I start testing, though I might be aware of the testing concepts, I might know what is testing, I'm aware of testing concept, but I cannot still start testing the application from day one. Someone should explain me about the application, right? Someone should explain me, give me a walkthrough about the application. I need to know the software well, only then I can test it. Someone should explain me about the process they're following, what tools they're using, right? So they should tell us the tools they're using, which test management tool is being used. Someone should give me those details. Someone should explain me about the process, about the team, like who is the business analyst, who is the developer, who is the tester, like the complete testing team, who is the manager, who is the client. So I should know about the team. I should know about the team. Only then I can contact them when anything is required. So you'll have 1 week, 15 days, or a month, depending on the project. You will have this period, it's called as the KT, knowledge transfer period, where someone is going to explain you all these things. They will explain you about the company's process. They'll explain you about the application. They'll give you walkthrough of the software or the application that you are going to test. They will explain, they'll give introduction to the team. So all these things are must before I start working on the project. And this we call it as knowledge transfer sessions, where you're given walkthrough, right? You're given walkthrough or you're made familiar with a particular document. It's also called as orientation sessions, also called as orientation sessions, where you're explained about the company's process, their leave policy, everything. They're also called as orientation sessions. Now, the person who gives you KT, he's called as a buddy or a friend who is going to give you the KT, right? Who provides you KT, he is called as a buddy or a friend. Then they do something called as job shadowing. They do something called as job shadowing. So what is job shadowing? Now let's say, for example, after a weeks of KT, after 1 week of KT, before you start working independently on the project, someone is going before you start working independently, what you do, the buddy who give you the KT, right, you will take some percentage of his work, and like let's say for example, around if he has to do 100 tests, you take 10 or 20 tests from his work, do the testing, So he can monitor and see whatever you're doing is correct before you start working on the complete application, or before you start working independently. So if there are any doubts, or if there are any mistakes you're doing, it can be corrected before you start working independently on the application. So this is called as job shadowing. This process, we call it as job shadowing. So what is job shadowing? Before you start working on the application independently, you take some part of the buddy's work, and then you do that work, so he can closely monitor what is being done. And if there are any corrections, he can tell the corrections, it can be corrected then and there itself, so you can confidently start working on the project. Now what happens, sometimes you may be hired to replace someone, right? So when you are hired to replace someone, before that person leaves, you should be comfortable, right? You should be comfortable with his work. So before he leaves, he should get all the doubts, queries clarified. So you should be able to work on it. So that is why we do something called as job shadowing. Once the KT period is over, we do job shadowing for some time, so we can get all the queries clarified, we can get all the doubts clarified from the buddy, and then we can start working on the application independently. Right, so these are some terms, like I said, you will hear when you join a new project: KT, walkthrough, orientation, buddy, and job shadowing. This is a picture of a knowledge transfer session. Now, before we move on to the next testing technique, we studied boundary value analysis. The next testing technique we have is equivalence class partitioning. But before we learn about equivalence class partitioning, there is one important topic, important concept we will learn first. And once we are done with this, we will move on. We'll continue with the testing techniques. Now, as testers, one important step that you have to do is to write something called as test scenarios and test cases. So what are test scenarios and test cases? So when you have to test an application, so in real time it would be a complex application which you're going to do, like, example Walmart. Walmart is a complex application, right? So if I go to Walmart and ask you to test this application, I'll just give walmart.com and I'll ask you to test this application. So if you see here, there are so many different things that should be tested, right? For this single page, you have to test account. In account, you have to test sign in, track order, account, help. You have to test my items, cart, and then you click here. You have track order, buy again, Walmart plus, and you have all these departments. All these departments have sub departments. All these things needs to be tested, right? So there are so many things that should go through testing. Now, when I have to test these many things, it's a complex application. When I randomly go and start testing the application, I might miss testing some important things, right? I might forget, or I might miss testing some important things, or I might miss to consider one important combination. So that is why what we do, we make a list of things that should be tested. So when you go to a store to buy something, if there are a lot of things that you have to purchase, you may not be able to remember everything, right? You might miss buying certain things. So what you do, you make a checklist. You make a list of things that you want to buy. So that way you will not forget anything. It is just like that. You make a list of different things that should be tested, and that list is nothing but test scenarios. Test scenario is a single line statement of what you are going to test. Yesterday, we did make a note of scenarios to test the login functionality, right? This is an old one, but yes, let me just correct it. So these are different scenarios that we identified for Walmart login, right? Testing with valid data, invalid data, everything. So we did identify 8 different types of tests. So these are nothing but your test scenarios. These are nothing but your test scenarios. These are just one line description of what you are going to test. You make a list of things that should be tested. For the login functionality, we did write 8 different scenarios that can be tested. So what are test scenarios? Test scenarios are one line description of what you are going to test. So in real time, what we do is we pick one functionality and then we identify different scenarios for those functionality and then we write it down. So that way you will not miss anything, right? So first you identify different scenarios. Test scenarios are just one line description which is going to tell you what you will test. Then what is a test case? Test case is a step-by-step procedure of how you are going to test these scenarios. So once we identify the test scenarios, the next thing we are going to do is to write test cases for those scenarios. Write test cases for those scenarios. So what are test cases? Test case are step-by-step procedure. Test case is step-by-step procedure of how you are going to test the application. You write the steps on how you will test the application. So that is nothing but a test case. So let's see how to write a test case. Write it in the Excel sheet. So right from the beginning, whatever steps should be done on the application. Right from the beginning, whatever steps should be done on the application, we have to write it in Excel sheet or any tool. So that we call it as a test case. So if I have to write a test case for the first scenario, the first scenario says verify user is able to log in. Verify user is able to log in when correct email address and correct password is entered. For this, if I have to write test case, I'll write like this. Your test case will have 4 columns. First is the serial number or step number. You give a step number for each step. And then you have step description. You have to give description of what you're going to do. And then the next column you have is the test data, what you will enter. And then the last column you will have is expected result. These are the 4 columns that you will have in your test case. Step number, I'll start with 1. Step number I will give as 1. Yeah, Deepa, sure. So we will be going through many examples, but since we have already identified test scenarios for Walmart login page, for the same one, I'm showing you how to write test case. But as and when we proceed, we will take examples of other applications also. But for Walmart login, yesterday we have already identified the test scenarios, right? For the scenarios, what I'm trying to show you is how a test case is written. So I've taken a simple example right now because we are just in the first week of the class, right? So it is very important for a tester to understand how a test case is written. So that's a very important step. So we'll start with a simple example so that you're comfortable with this concept of writing test case. You will have homeworks to write some test cases. You can get those test cases reviewed, like you can have a one-on-one review, get these test cases reviewed. Again, we'll start with some basic examples, but as and when we go through other weeks of QA, you will have more examples to write test cases. So all the test cases you can get it reviewed, so you know where you are making mistake. But to start with, I'll take a simple example. So step number is a serial number. Step number is a serial number. I'll give step number as 1. And then the next thing is you have to write step description. What is step description? Step description tells what you have to do on the application. Okay, what action should be done on the application. So the first step I have to do is to open browser and enter Walmart URL. Open browser and enter Walmart URL. This is the first step I need to do. Open browser and enter Walmart URL. Now for this particular step, if there is any test data that should be entered, that you will give in column C. This is where many people make mistakes. Test data. So let's understand what is a test data. Anything that you enter on the application during the testing process is called as a test data. Like if you're testing a flight booking application from city to city, flight date, number of tickets, passenger name, all these are test data, right? Because these are the things I should enter when I'm testing the application. So basically, whatever you enter on the application when you're testing it, it is called as a test data. So for in this example, for this particular step, can you tell me what will be the test data? What should be the test data? Any idea what should be the test data for this particular step?
The URL.
URL, correct. So URL of the application, Walmart URL is what I have to type. So URL of the application will be my test data. So in this test data column, you are not going to write any sentence. You just have to mention what should be entered. So I'll write www.walmart.com will be my test data. Username, password, I'm not going to enter in this step. In this particular step, if you see the step description, it says open browser and enter Walmart URL. Open browser and enter Walmart URL. So this is the step description. For this step, the test data would be walmart.com. Okay. Now, when this step is done, what is expected to happen? That you will give in the expected result column. When I open the browser, enter Walmart URL, I should get Walmart homepage, right? I'll write that in expected result. Walmart homepage must be displayed. Walmart homepage must be displayed will go in expected result. And then you write the next step. So once I go to Walmart homepage, the next step I have to do is click on account, click on sign in, right? Let's write the same thing. Second step, I'll say click on account on the top right corner and click on sign in link or sign in button. Now, for this particular step, second step, is there any test data that I should give in the test data column? Let me just wrap it.
No.
No, right? No test data here. We are just doing a click operation. We're just doing a click operation. So I don't have to give any test data. I don't have any test data to give. So either I can leave column C blank or just write not applicable. And again, when this step is done, what is expected to happen that you will give in column D? Expected is Walmart login page must be displayed. And then the third step, on the login page, what I should do? I'll say enter valid email address in the email text box. Enter valid email address in the email text box. Again, any test data, in this case, it would be the email address, right? So what email address to enter? Yes, you're right. That I'll mention in column C. Let's say I have to enter this. This is the email address I have to enter. And again, when this is done, what is expected? Whatever email address I've typed, it should be accepted in that text box, right? Entered email ID must be accepted. And then next step, I can enter password. Enter valid password in the password text box. Again, for this step, password would be the test data. Let's say this is the password I have to type. When this step is done, what is expected? Password must be masked, right? I should not be able to see the password that I have typed. So I'll write password is accepted and masked. And then the last step I'll do is fifth step, click on sign in button. Click on sign in button. So here it is just a click operation we have to do, right? We have to click on the sign in button. So no test data, I'll write as not applicable. When this step is done, what is expected to happen? That you will give in expected result. Sign in must be successful. In first name of the customer must be displayed under accounts, under account. So this is expected, right? So like this, you write your test case. Writing test scenarios and test case is one important step for a tester. First, you pick one functionality, you identify different scenarios that should be tested, and then for these scenarios, write how to test it. That is nothing but your test case. So, test scenarios talk about what to test case talks about how to test these scenarios. Test scenarios are just one line description, they tell you what to test, and test case will tell you how to test these scenarios. Now, when you look at these steps, you will be able to test your application. If I give this test case to anyone, anybody who does not know the application, even they can test the application by following these steps. That is how a test case should be documented. So any person who does not have knowledge about the application should also be able to perform the test. That is how a test case is written with these four columns. One thing you need to know here is what is populated in each of these columns. So test data is where many people make mistakes. They end up writing sentence, or even if it's a click, like click on sign in test data, they'll write sign in. No. So here in test data, you're just going to mention what you're going to enter or select when you're doing this particular step. Only that is considered as a test data. Don't write anything if it is just a click operation you're doing. Okay, so this is how a test case is written. I'll show you a test case template. You will receive a test case template Excel sheet. in which you have to write test cases for few scenarios. Like I said, we will start with some simple scenarios like basic things which you use on a very frequent or a daily basis. And then as and when we proceed further, we'll give you some other examples also. But to start with, we'll take few simple scenarios. So this is an empty template. This is a test case template. You have to populate this part of the template. Whatever is given here, it is only for your understanding. Just read through these things or points that is written. It is, only for your knowledge, like what should be written in each of the columns and what mistakes the beginners usually do. Everything is given here. So same 4 columns: step number, step description, test data, expected result. Apart from this, on the top you also have to populate these things. So you have to give a name to your test case. Test case name. What is test case name? There is a naming convention that you have to follow when you're giving a name to your test case. That is the standard operating procedure. Your test lead or test manager will set this naming convention, and everybody should follow this naming convention. So they have to give a proper name to the test case. I'll show you the standard procedure to give a name to the test case. Let's add it to this test case which we wrote. Now, for this test case, the naming convention that we follow is this: company name, product name, screen name, type of test, whether it's a positive or a negative test, and a serial number. These are the things that we have to give. So company name for this test case that we wrote is Walmart. So I'll write Walmart underscore. Product name. Now Walmart will have many products. Walmart.com is their e-commerce product. Similarly, they will have applications which will be used in Walmart store. They'll have applications used in Walmart warehouse. They will have an application used by Walmart call center. So like this, one company may have multiple applications. So you have to give the application name that you're testing. So this is e-com application. So I'll write e-commerce underscore. Next, the screen name. The screen name, which screen you're testing. I'm testing the login screen underscore. The next thing you have to mention is whether it is a positive test or a negative test. Positive and negative are also part of your testing techniques, right? We have 5 different black box testing techniques. We have boundary value analysis, equivalence class partitioning, error guessing, positive testing, and negative testing. We have covered boundary value analysis, but the last two are positive and negative test. So what are positive tests and negative tests? Now when you have any functionality, when you have to test any functionality, you need to consider both positive and negative flows. So for login, we did write all scenarios, right? What happens when valid username and password is entered? Not just that. We also wrote scenarios which will test what happens when invalid username and password is entered. We also wrote what should happen when invalid username and password is entered, because that also should be considered. What should happen when invalid username and password is entered? What should happen when I don't enter anything? All these things should be tested. So you need to mention whether it is a positive test or negative test. Before that, let's go through different scenarios that we wrote for login, and let's identify whether these are positive test or a negative test. Okay, you can ping the answer in the chat box. So the first scenario says verify user is able to log in when correct email and correct password is entered. What do you think? This is a positive test or a negative test? Yes, this is a positive test, right? Yes, you're right. So this is a positive test. This is a positive test. I'll just update it as P. The next one. Verify application throws error when incorrect email and correct password is entered. Negative test. Yes. This is a negative test. This is a negative test. And then the third one. Verify application throws error when correct email and incorrect password is entered. What about the third one? No, second one is negative. Second one is negative. It will be either negative or positive, not both. Okay. Second one is negative. What about the third one? So this is a negative test, right? It says verify application throws error. Right? Verify application throws error when correct email and incorrect password is entered. So this is a negative test. This is a negative test. The next one, the fourth one, verify application throws error when email address field is left blank. Negative. Right? Negative. Verify application throws error when password field is left blank. This is also negative. Verify application throws error when email address format is incorrect. This is also negative. Yes. Verify, let's see the seventh one. Verify password is displayed when you click on the show link, and clicking on hide should mask the password. What about the seventh one? Seventh one is positive. Yes, this is positive test. Verify user account is logged after 3 invalid attempts. What about the last one? Verify user account is logged after 3 invalid attempts. Okay, for the last one, I'm getting mixed answer, negative and positive. So here they're talking about user account getting locked, right? So what will happen when your user account is locked? You'll see a message saying that your account is locked. Please try after 30 minutes or contact customer support. That's a message which we usually see. So this is a negative test, right? So we get a message saying your account is locked. So it's not a happy flow, right? Your account is getting locked, which means you're testing a negative scenario, negative flow. So this is a negative test. The last one is negative. So like this, for any scenario, you have to identify both positive and negative flows. So that also is part of testing technique. Just verifying the positive flow is not enough. Negative flows also should be tested to see if the application behaves correctly when something incorrect is entered on the application or when a user does something wrong. So positive and negative are also part of testing techniques. When you're writing test case, you have to mention whether it is a positive test or a negative test. This one is positive, so I'll say positive. And then you just give serial number to your test case, starting with 1 and then 2, 3, 4, so on. So just give some serial number. So this is the naming convention that we follow when we are writing the test case. Company name, product name, screen name, whether it is a positive test or a negative test, and a serial number. And then down below here, you need to give the description of the test. You have to mention what this test case does. Verify, just one line description. User is able to log in with valid email and password. And then here you have to write something called as prerequisite. So what is a prerequisite? Prerequisite is also called as precondition. Prerequisite or precondition means what should be available, what you should already have to test this test case. That we write it as a prerequisite, or in some companies they also call it as precondition. Now to test this particular test case, I'm starting with open browser and enter Walmart URL. I'm mentioning what email address and password to enter. So what do you think will be the prerequisite? Anything that you can think of, like what should be the prerequisite for this? Take a guess. And if it's wrong, no problem. What should be there? What should be available in order to test this test case? Okay, I've got few answers here. Then who says valid account, login page, the user has to hold an account. Yes, so that would be my prerequisite. Whatever email address and password I'm using, I should have an account set up, right? I should already have an account created with that email address and password. I should have an account created with that email address and password. Only then I will be able to log in. Using that email address and password, I will be able to log in. Only if I have an account set up with that email address and password. So that will be my prerequisite. So prerequisite is nothing but what should be there, what should be available when you test this test case. When you're testing this test case, what you should already have. So that is nothing but a prerequisite, which is also called as precondition. What should be available? So that I will write in prerequisite. So in prerequisite, we can add valid account with mentioned email and password is set up. Only then I can test. And then here you give any reference document, any document that you have referred to write this test case. So that we have to give here. So usually reference document will be your requirement document, the FRS document, right? We also add something called as SDD, but what is SDD, that we will learn later. We've still not covered SDD so far. We have only covered this FRS document. FRS is this functional requirement specification document which will be created by the business analyst, right? For now I'll just write FRS. Next week we'll be covering about software design document, it's called as SDD. So we will see what is SDD, who creates it, and what things are written. But so far we have learned only about FRS, so just mention FRS as the reference document. So this is how a test case is written. Now, okay, let me just go back. This is you have homework to write test case. Like I said, for a tester, writing test case is something which is very important, right? So we know what is prerequisite, we know what is a test case. Writing test case is something which is very important. I'll show you one more example of a test case. But homework is write one positive and one negative test case, only test case. So you have to write one positive and one negative test case for the scenarios given below. There are three scenarios given. For these three scenarios, you have to write one positive and one negative test case. The soft deadline is Friday. Try to complete it before Friday and then have a one-on-one review. You can send your test case to Madhu, that is info@getsoftwareservices.com. Mention your time zone and when you're available, and based on yours and Madhu's availability, you can review your test case. Like you can have a one-on-one review, so any mistakes you can correct it, so you will be more confident in writing test cases. So prerequisite, before you write test case, play the recorded video, especially yesterday's and today's class. Please play the recorded video of yesterday's and today's class before you start writing the test cases. Right, so we know the difference between test scenario and test case, right? Test scenario talks about what to test. Test case talks about how to test these scenarios. You write the steps on how to test a scenario. And please write the test case in the test case template file, this Excel file. You're going to receive this Excel sheet. This is the test case template. From here, whatever is written is only for your reading, but this is the section that you have to fill. Now the scenarios are, don't write actual result and status when you are authoring. When I say authoring test case, that means writing test case. Authoring test case, designing test case, writing test case, they all mean the same. Okay. So the three scenarios for which you write test case, the first scenario, ATM cash withdrawal. Write the steps on how you can withdraw cash from ATM machine. We will start with a simple one. Write the test steps on how to withdraw cash from ATM machine. Let's say you can withdraw cash maximum of $500. In a day, you cannot withdraw more than $500. That is the requirement. For this, you have to write one positive and one negative test case. Tabs are already created here. You just have to fill these tabs. Walmart login, whatever I wrote is also written here. ATM positive, ATM negative. That's one scenario. The second scenario is purchase an item from vending machine, like purchase soda. Purchase an item from vending machine. That would be your second scenario. Again, write one positive and one negative. In test case template, write one positive for vending machine, one negative test case for vending machine. And then the third scenario, elevator operation to go to a particular floor. If you want to go to floor 21, the steps you have to do to use an elevator. Again, one positive and one negative test case to do elevator operation. So these are the three scenarios. In total, you have to write 6 test cases, one positive, one negative for each of the test case: ATM machine, vending machine, and elevator operation. So if you see, test case is nothing but AIR, what we studied yesterday. AIR recap: action, input, reaction. Action, input, reaction. This is exactly what we do when we are writing test case, right? We mention what action should be done on the application, what should be the input, and test the reaction. Writing test case is nothing but AIR, action. You do some action on the application, you give input, you check if the reaction is correct. That's exactly what we write in a test case. Estimated time, like beginners might take little longer. So you might need approximately 6 hours to write these test cases. But again, like I said, the prerequisite is go through the recorded videos first and then start writing your test cases. And once you're done, you send it to Madhu, info@getsoftwareservices.com for one-on-one review. Mention your time zone and city and your preferred time in the email body. So once Madhu receives the homework, he'll set up a one-on-one meeting. Then you can review it. Daily homework will be play the previous class video and prepare your own notes. Now this is the best way to learn all the QA concepts. You will come across so many terms, so many definitions, right? So the best thing is play the recorded video and write down whatever you've learned. Just write it down, write your own notes. So that is the best way to remember and learn all the concepts in QA. You may not understand 100% in the class itself. You will not be able to remember everything in the class. So you have to play the recorded video minimum 2 times and then prepare your own notes. Even after playing the recorded video 2 times, if you're not able to understand any concept, you can ask for a one-on-one meeting. Okay. And reminder to register to GSS site from next week. All these videos and materials will be uploaded to GSS site. So here is the link. It's a one-time registration. It will hardly take 5 minutes. So register. Once registered, you'll be authorized so you can log in. And once you log in, you will be able to access all the videos and materials. You can download them. You can keep it with you so you can play the video any number of times. Right. I'll show you one more sample test case for the example that we took for the marks calculator. So here we have identified different scenarios. We are verifying what happens when entered marks is 70, verifying what happens when entered marks is 60. We are verifying what happens when marks entered is greater than 100, like what happens when we enter marks as 110. And then we verify what happens when we leave the marks field empty, when we don't enter anything in the marks field, we directly click on submit. In that case, what will happen? These are some of the scenarios we have identified, but you have to test for each grade. Here we are testing only for grade A. Same way you have to test for each grade, and these are our negative scenarios. And then for this we write positive test case. Here, open calculator, enter marks in the marks edit box, click on submit. Since we are entering 55, it should show the grade as B. Similarly, we've written a negative test case. Open marks calculator from here, no test data, calculator opens, enter marks. We are entering the marks greater than 100. We are entering marks as 110. When I enter marks as 110, marks should be accepted in the marks field, and then you click on submit. Here we are just doing a click operation, so no test data. We should see a message saying please enter marks from 0 to 100 only. So you should enter a marks from 0 to 100 only. So you should enter marks from 0 to 100. So like this you have to write your test case. So you will receive this file and also this test case template file which has these empty tabs. You have to write your test case in these tabs. Okay, so that will be your homework for this week. So clear, any questions in writing test cases? So far, is it clear? Okay. Now the next testing technique is equivalence class partitioning. We've covered boundary value analysis. We know positive test and negative test. So the second testing, three we have covered. The next testing technique is equivalence class partitioning. So equivalence class partitioning is similar to your boundary value analysis, which means equivalence class partitioning is a testing technique which you apply again for your test data. So when you have range of values, if your input accepts range of values, that is when you can go with equivalence class partitioning. Now the same principle applies here also. It is not possible to test the field or test the application with all possible test data. Practically, it is not possible. We call it as exhaustive testing. It is not possible to test it with each and every combination. So we have to decide what should be the right amount of test we have to do. That is when this equivalence class partitioning comes into picture. Now, according to equivalence class partitioning, says that you classify your test data into equivalence classes. You classify your test data into equivalence classes, and then you pick one sample from each class. You pick one sample from each class and test it. If that sample works, we assume that all other samples are also going to work the same way. It's called a sampling technique. For example, if you are cooking vegetables, you want to check whether vegetable is cooked or not. You don't have to test it with each and every pieces of vegetable that you're cooking, right? You pick one or two samples and test it. So same technique is applied here also. You don't have to test it with each and every number or each and every combination. You divide your test data into classes. You test with one sample from that class. And if that sample works, you assume all other samples are also going to work. That is equivalence class partitioning. So main thing is boundary value analysis will focus on the boundary values like from and to, whereas equivalence class partitioning can focus on the test data which is there in between, right? So any test data that falls within that range, you can pick that by using equivalence class partitioning. Do we need to combine? Yes, when you combine boundary value and equivalence class together, you will get the right amount of test with possibility of finding maximum number of bugs. So in most cases, we apply boundary value and equivalence class together. Like I said, when you apply boundary value, you're going to test the range, right? End values. Whereas when you apply equivalence class, you can pick numbers which is within, like in between numbers. So when you apply both of them together, you can test it with wide range of values, but yet with minimum number of test cases. So usually we apply both of them together. We will combine both of them together. Okay. So that's the definition of equivalence class partitioning, but we will see this, we'll learn this with some examples. We'll see how to apply equivalence class partitioning. But it's already time. I'll stop here and we will meet again next week. That's on Friday, April 23rd. April 23rd is when you will have the next class, second week, where we'll continue with equivalence class partitioning. We'll also learn about error guessing. So any questions, anyone, before we wind up? Okay. All right. If there are no questions, yes, you'll get the recorded video. You've received yesterday's and orientation class video. If you've received those, then you will get this also. In case you have not received, check the spam folder. If it is not there, you can send an email to info@getsoftwareservices.com. In case you have not received yesterday's or first day's class video, if you have received, then this also you will receive because your email ID will be added. Okay. All right. All right then. So we'll stop here and we'll meet again on Friday for the next QA class. Thank you so much. Good night. Bye bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.